So, Jim, we were talking about your new film. So it takes place in Detroit and Europe?
One project that I'm working on that I'm seeing if it's going to be made is, yes, it's set in Detroit and Tangiers. So it goes back and forth, really. Most of it takes place in Detroit, but in the beginning, and it ends in Morocco, at the beginning.
And you wrote it?
I wrote it, yes.
So why those two locations?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to sort of tell you the whole story, and that would be a long, rambling, ridiculous thing.
But do Detroit and Tangiers have like some integral part to the?
Yeah, the story is a love story of two sort of eccentric lovers who are, well, definitely eccentric. They have been in love for hundreds of years because they are vampires. Whoa. But it is a anti-vampire kind of story because really it's about a love story of two very unique kind of bohemian outsider types that have watched human nature for hundreds of years. And they love human expression, artists, architects, writers, scientists. But the male of these two, it's a male and female, he's very Hamlet-like, and he's a sort of underground rock musician in a kind of avant rock drone stuff. But he knows how to play any kind of stringed instrument, but he's gravitated toward that. And he's very depressed by how humans, what they've done over these centuries. So he's very moody and Hamlet-like, and she's very resilient. Mm-hmm. But they're having a very hard time surviving, and you know, it's not a go out and bite your neck kind of vampire story at all. They have to get clean blood that's not contaminated by making deals with some clandestine deals with a doctor or stealing from some clinic like ninjas, or, you know, they've been around a long time.
So if they've been around for hundreds of years practicing art or music, they're probably like the best musicians and artists around.
Well, she's more an appreciator of literature. Like her whole house in Tangier, her apartment is lined with books, wall to wall, and she can read a myriad of languages and read books very, very fast. She loves language and books. He loves science and all kinds of art, as does she, but his output, his expression is through stringed instruments and the vibration of strings.
Okay, but that makes me ask a question, like, Rob, I'll ask both of you. So what do you think, like, because it's sort of like, almost like a computer, like if you could live for hundreds of years and like just paint for hundreds of years, like you could train yourself to be, you know, ostensibly be like the, you know, the greatest greatest skilled painter. Where does like the art come into that? Or is that just sort of like a computer then, and then is it that the ideas are more important than the skill? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Because for me, like, vampires or immortality or creatures that live forever, in some ways are kind of a metaphor for this, you know, electronic intelligence, or, you know, all this technology, because it can do stuff that we can't do in our limited capacity as humans that only live so long and only have, you know, so many kind of skills. Do you know what I mean? So like,
and
when you
technology can
art,
kind of time travel too, like 'cause it's like an anthology of everything that came before it as well. I don't know. I think that if I were a vampire that became one 200 years ago, I think that would be my dilemma, like reinventing my art every day rather than building upon a skill set.
And would it even, would art matter also to a creature like that? Like,
well, in my story, it matters immensely to them because they are less metaphors for like technological development than a metaphor, although they are not human because they are not mortal. Although they are mortal, they can die. You know, it's fragile. They're very fragile. But for me, they're a metaphor for the fragility of humans. So, and it's a very tender kind of story. And for me, I'm I'm not anti-technique or the virtuosity, say, let's just say as musicians. Technique and knowing things is very valuable, but in the end it doesn't mean anything to me. It's a delivery system for expressing something. Mm-hmm. So I can be moved by the most primitive, let's say, guitar player, if they're expressing something they really feel. And in my story, this guy, although he could play a viola or anything like behind his back, he's now interested in kind of drone music and a kind of minimal electric guitar kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's just his taste. So, but I guess, now that you ask that question, that in itself is an example of my preference for expression over technique always. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, so mm-hmm. I think people get too caught up in technique and even the tools they use.
So was that how you felt from the beginning? I mean, because you went to NYU and Columbia at the same time?
No, I studied literature at Columbia as an undergraduate, then I went to NYU Film School. Okay.
And you studied with like
Kenneth Koch and David Shapiro at Columbia.
Yes. In writing.
Yes.
And then at NYU, you famously were with
Nicholas Ray. Yes. I got to be his assistant, his teaching assistant, his gopher, whatever.
And the early film that most people would probably think of is, Stranger Than Paradise, but you actually did a film before that, right? A feature-length film before that.
Yes.
Was that for NYU, or that was right after NYU?
It was supposed to be for NYU, but it was not acceptable because I got a Louis B. Mayer Foundation grant to pay my tuition at NYU, and instead of paying it to the school, I used it to make the film. And then the school was not happy about that, and also our assignment as a third-year, final-year student, grad student, was to make like a 20-minute film. And I went out and came back with an 80-minute film. And so that didn't go over well. I wasn't given a degree,
you didn't get
which I understand. I got a degree years later.
You did?
Yeah, because I saw an ad and they were saying, former graduates include Marty Scorsese and Spike Lee and Jim Jarmusch. And I said in some interview, well, that's interesting because, man, I never got a degree. In fact, they weren't real happy with me. And then a few weeks later, or a month later, I got a degree in the mail.
So. Oh, that's great.
So I did get one in the end, but it was different people by then, I think.
And what's that film called?
It's called Permanent Vacation.
Yeah, and I've seen it. It's on special features of maybe the Criterion Collection or something.
It might have, I think they put it out on the DVD
I've
with
seen it.
Stranger Than Paradise. Yeah, it's a $12,000 film shot in 10 days, all in the street with a 5-person crew or whatever, and I was inspired by Amos Poe, who did like kind of punk rock street films, The Foreigner and Unmade Beds, and Eric Mitchell, who I knew back then, who's in my film Permanent Vacation. And I actually did sound on his film Underworld USA and appeared in one of his films, I think, called Red Italy. But that was back, this is late 70s, early 80s. So.
Okay, so I have a question. So you have all those influences, guys that maybe, like Poe, that maybe, are like a second or third generation after Jonas Mekas' kind of avant-garde group or experimental group. And that one kind of walks the line between like a commercial kind of, or something that would be released in commercial theaters and this sort of underground film, right? So why, and you still, I think with every film you've done, you still kind of walk this line.
Yeah, to us back then, those films were under film. Stranger Than Paradise. We never thought anyone would ever really see it.
You didn't?
No. We thought if we're lucky, maybe Jonas might show it at Anthology, but we didn't think it was going to be shown in Cannes or in movie theaters. That was a big shock to us. We were, really? You want to distribute this? We had no clue.
Well, so how much did it cost?
Stranger cost about 150,000.
And how did you get that money without, you know, how did you get money for a film that you thought would never be seen?
Well, I got some money from German television, from ZDF.
And how long after you finished it was it in theaters?
Well, we finished it in 1984 in the early part of the year. Then we went in May to the Cannes Film Festival, and then we got the Camera d'Or, the prize for first film, even though I had made another film because it was supposed to be a student film. They said, okay, you're still eligible for this. And then we got distribution.
Wow.
Someone picked it up for France and for Germany and then for the States. And